The reality is that I think that that's where we are going to walk that fine line. We are going to be able to get people that potentially have voted for Trump, even though I obviously am one of his loudest opponents. Because at the end of the day, they vote for who they believe is fighting for them.
That is Texas Democrat Jasmine Crockett giving CNN's Laura Coates her first interview after announcing her bid for the U.S. Senate. Joining me now to discuss that and more, our political panel, Areva Martin, best-selling author, CNN legal analyst, and founder of the Special Needs Network. John Kobylt is the host of the John Kobylt Show on KFI AM 640 here in Los Angeles, available everywhere as a podcast on the iHeartRadio app. Welcome to you both.
Thanks. Good to see you.
Thanks for having us.
Always a pleasure.
So Jasmine Crockett put out her first ad. She didn't say anything. She let Donald Trump do the talking. She sat there, and these were all things that Trump has said about her. Here's some of that.
Somebody said the other day, she's one of the leaders of the party. I said, you got to be kidding.
Now they're going to rely on Crockett. Crockett's going to bring them back.
So what do you make this as a strategy? What do you make of Jasmine?
I think it's pretty smart. Jasmine is brilliant. She has been so effective in going toe-to-toe with Donald Trump and talking straight to the American people. And that's what has made her a rising star in the Democratic Party. She's already the front runner in this Texas race to be a U.S. senator. So I'm super excited about her candidacy. And I think she's going to galvanize not just the Democrats and independents in Texas, but those independents and Democrats all over the country. So this is a good thing for the party.
I mean, it's interesting because she has such a different strategy than James Tallarico, who is a member of the legislature in Texas, more soft-spoken, highlights his, I'm working with everybody, I'll go on Fox News Channel all the time. Let's put up the full screen showing sort of his response to all of this. I guess we don't have that. Basically, he's saying, we welcome everybody, we're welcoming of everybody in the race. What do you make of this contrast?
I don't know what to make of her. It's hard. There's no shortage of delusional people who will run for an office that they have no business running for. I have no idea how she expects to win a majority vote in the state of Texas. Is she aware of the state that she's in? I mean, they got a governor who they supported greatly. He was famous for sending literally hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens to cities all across the country. Like, what's the market for Jasmine Crockett beyond her congressional district?
Well,
like, I don't get it. They're just simply not the kind of people that would vote for her living in that state in great enough numbers.
I think you're wrong about that. And you talk about delusional candidates. Donald Trump has written a playbook on being a delusional candidate. So I think Jasmine Crockett has as good of a chance of winning in a state like Texas as Donald Trump had in terms of winning the country. And you look at what Beto O'Rourke did in 2018. He broke the ceiling of Democrats, votes in Texas. He came within 2% of beating Ted Cruz, who was a very, very popular Republican in the state of Texas. So when you think about the energy that we've seen so many progressives like Jasmine Crockett have across this country, I think this is the perfect time for her to throw her name into the ring and to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump and then those Texans who are looking for an alternative. Donald Trump's ratings are failing. The American people are tired of his chaos and his lack of leadership.
I've been hearing that one for 11 years now. Trump is always failing in his ratings, always on the verge of blowing it, always on. He's still here. He's going to be here another 3 years. And when she has to run against a Republican candidate, not Trump. I mean, this is the mistake Newsom is making. By the time Newsom runs for president, Trump's not going to be on the ballot. I want to know how Jasmine Crockett's going to represent people in Texas other than saying Trump is crazy. I mean, to me, that's a really tired act. Okay, let's grant you he's crazy. Now, what are you going to do for people in Texas who are struggling economically? I don't hear that. I hear this performance art, like she's auditioning for Saturday Night Live.
That strategy clearly works in a state like California to win statewide elections where people are very anti-Trump. But Areva, to John's point about the Texas electorate, would there be an argument that maybe an approach like Tallarico, which is more of saying to Republicans, you can support me, I'm with you, I'm talking your language, maybe would allow them to vote for him more comfortably than somebody like
we've
Crockett?
heard that over and over again. And the reality is, yes, Texas is not California. Jasmine Crockett is not delusional about the fact that she's in the state of Texas. She's already won a congressional seat in the state of Texas. So she knows the voters in that state. So, but we also know that there is a hunger, there is an appetite for young progressive candidates like her, not just in states like California, but even in states like Texas. And under that theory, no Democrat would ever run in a red state like Texas. And yes, the state legislator, Tallarico, who is running, has a different approach, but that doesn't mean that his approach is going to be the winning approach. Already, Jasmine Crockett has been in this race one day, and she's already, because of her name ID, because of the money that she's already proven that she can raise, she's going to be the front runner and likely to be the candidate that wins the primary, the Democratic primary. Now, yes, does she have a tougher pathway in Texas than California? Of course she does, but that doesn't mean she doesn't have a way that she can win to be the U.S. Senator for the state of Texas.
Meanwhile, let's talk about the state of California for a moment. The governor of California, Gavin Newsom, was just in Washington, D.C. last week. He wanted to meet with the Trump administration to talk about fire relief. In the past, we remember in January, President Trump and Gavin Newsom spoke on the tarmac at LAX. They shook hands. President Trump said, "I'm going to be there for you." These are some of the other meetings that Newsom had in Washington last week. You see a lot of Democrats. What you don't see is anybody from the Trump administration. They did not agree to meet with him. Nobody from FEMA would meet with him. Newsom administration says that that's unprecedented to not meet with the governor while they're in town and they request a meeting. Do you have a problem with the Trump administration not meeting with the governor to talk about this issue?
If I was in the Trump administration, I'd be asking myself, how would I trust Newsom with tens of billions of dollars? He wants almost $34 billion. When you look at $24 billion in homeless money that Newsom admits disappeared and he doesn't know where it is. $17 billion in high-speed rail money, same thing, and there's no high-speed rail. $33 billion in unemployment funds during COVID, that disappeared, most of it to fraud. Why would you give Gavin Newsom $34 billion when you've got over $70 billion unaccounted for in those other three categories?
Well, first of all, those facts just aren't facts. Those are all. Gavin Newsom has never said, "I can't account for $30 billion that's been given to me by the federal government."
Oh, no,
and
the $24 billion in homeless money, he admitted he doesn't know what it is.
Absolutely, positively not. And the question was, meeting with Gavin Newsom. Look, the reality is Donald Trump is the president for all Americans, not just those that live in red states. And he's not hurting Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom's home didn't burn in the Palisades. He's hurting voters. He's hurting first responders. He's hurting small business owners. He's hurting the people of the state of California. And he's setting a horrible precedent for individuals, for voters, for citizens of this country that live in states that have been the victims of disasters like these fires. And for him not to meet or have someone from his administration meet with this governor is childish. This is schoolyard energy. This is not leadership energy, which we need and should expect from a president. It's ridiculous that he wouldn't sit down or have his administration meet about the needs of these victims, these fire victims.
Have you seen what he's done for months? The stuff he's said about Trump on X?
How much stuff has Trump said about him?
Hello,
though?
I know,
that's
but Newsom, there's a
John.
difference.
That doesn't have anything to do with the victims. I'm a resident of this state.
Newsom doesn't have any leverage on Trump. So
the only
if you're
way
a politician,
that you can get help as a victim is to have leverage. What about the voters? Do you care about the voters? Aren't there Republican voters that live in the Palisades?
yes, there
Don't
are.
They deserve to get help?
There are, and Newsom spends $35 billion a year on illegal aliens. So why doesn't he spend it on Americans and rebuild the fire-ravaged areas instead of on illegal aliens who aren't?
Don't you have a problem though with this concept of sort of let's help the states that help me? I mean, isn't that different than what
we
we've
Americans
seen
too, John?
In an ideal world, yes, but you know Trump's game. He's been around 11 years. If Newsom was smart, why would he go and insult Trump every day? If you want to get tens of billions of dollars out of somebody, and again, you have no leverage, and Trump really, really values leverage, and he's looking at Newsom the way he looked at Zelensky.
John,
you have no cards, buddy.
Which is what Newsom did during COVID.
Right.
Which is why Trump said so many nice things about him during COVID, and which is why California got amongst the most money.
This isn't about the boys
Right.
on the playground. This is about the victims. Let's keep the focus on the victims.
A smart guy plays the game.
Stay focused on the victims.
All right, that's going to be the last word. Areva, John, great to see you both. And we are, of course, going to be focused on the victims, doing a lot of reporting on that in the next few months here on The Story Is.